of what I'm sure are going to be electrifying lightning talks. My name is Nathan Huey. I am a second-year doctoral student, and this is actually my first time doing this. I've been to lightning talks before. Now I know some of you may be thinking, this is not the first time that Nathan has done this. I've seen him up here doing this before, last year. But you would have been mistaken, falling into what I think is, I'm going to call a type 3 error, which is the classic Nathan Harrison mix-up. This is Harrison, everyone. This is the classic Harvard Biostat mix-up. I can understand it. We look somewhat similar. We're both strapping young boys from the Midwest. I get it. I get it. We both have that strange, like, post-college, maybe they were hipsters in college vibe. I get that too. But if you ever have a difficulty figuring out which is which, imagine you're a slightly short person talking to one of us very close up, and if you had to crane your neck and have a prolonged conversation with one of us, you just gauge how bad it would hurt. If it's not so bad, it's Nathan. And if it's, holy cow, my neck hurts, it's Harrison. So anyway. Not to make this about me, it has nothing to do with it. We're here for some lightning talks, very good. So I'm supposed to introduce our very first speaker, Dr. Fitzmaurice. There it is.
Thank you, Nathan. So in addition to being a faculty member in this department, my primary home is at McLean Hospital in Belmont, which is a freestanding psychiatric hospital. So I thought I would talk about a project that's in its very early stages that I've just begun, looking at reduction in use as a primary outcome in stimulant use disorder trials. I thought I'd give you just a little bit of background. Currently there's no pharmacotherapy or medications for treating stimulant use disorders, so stimulants such as cocaine or methamphetamine. And interestingly, the FDA requires a period of sustained abstinence as the primary outcome in clinical trials of new medications. NIDA, the National Institute of Drug Abuse, has recently become interested in whether there's any empirical evidence to support alternative outcomes to abstinence, such as some measures of reduction in use. And this may have been prompted by a shift in a related field in alcohol, where the FDA now accepts no heavy drinking days rather than abstinence as a primary outcome. So by way of context, if you look at some of the past trials of, for example, cocaine use disorder, you find that many subjects, participants in these trials, don't abstain in an enduring way. But a lot of them do reduce their use substantially. And so then this raises the question, with a measure such as abstinence, do you really want to equate 15 days of use in a month to be the same as 5 days of use, 2 days, 1 day, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of methodological issues, though, in this area. It's generally accepted that in a lot of clinical trials, you can't accurately or reliably measure quantity of drug used. And so it tends to be a lot more of a focus on frequency of use, days of use, things like that. And that's even problematic as well, because most of the data is either self-report and or a combination of urine screens. Self-report data is problematic because you may question the truthfulness of the reports. Urine screens are more objective, but yet don't provide the actual number of days of use. They really just sort of flag use. So what I want to just mention is, as we've started to dig into this problem, one of the challenging problems really is the amount of missing data in these trials. And it makes, first of all, the definition of abstinent and non-abstinent outcomes a bit more problematic. It's exacerbated by the fact that it's very common in these trials to use very ad hoc methods for dealing with the missing data. And one of the most common and favorite choices is so-called worst value imputation. So in a sense, you equate any missing data with presumed drug use. There's lots of reasons why that's problematic. You're assuming a perfect relationship between missing data and drug use. You're not accounting for uncertainty. tending to penalize the treatment arm with the greatest extent of missing data more than anything else. Lots of things you could probably do better, like multiple imputation weighting methods, and so we're sort of investigating that. Whether you're using weighting methods or imputation methods, you do have to make assumptions. The missing at random assumption is probably not a good assumption in this context, but assuming not missing at random at least might allow for probable but not definite drug use. So you're making a sort of somewhat more realistic assumption. This little sort of toy example of a little 2x2 table of drug use by missing data sort of shows you the problem. The real problem is with missing data, you can't identify the cells in the first row of the table. They're unknown. Once you assume something about the relationship, though, between the variables, then they're identified. So if you posit an odds ratio, then you can identify the two cells. The worst value imputation, in a sense, is assuming the odds ratio is infinite. Missing at random might also be just as unrealistic. It assumes the odds ratio is 1. What you probably want to do is assume an odds ratio, some range of values that are greater than 1, but bounded away from infinity. So a lot of our project is focusing on using a collection of existing clinical trial data on stimulant use disorder trials, examining whether alternative measures to abstinence, various measures of reduction in use, might be more sensitive for assessing treatment effects. Importantly, another feature we want to look at is whether such measures are predictive of other areas of functioning beyond treatment, because that would be an important consideration. And then trying to use more rigorous statistical methods for handling a lot of the methodological issues like missing data and so on. I should mention my colleagues and collaborators in this. Roger Weiss is a psychiatrist at McLean Hospital, also an expert in addiction. And then a long-term friend and colleague, Stuart Lipsitz, is a fellow biostatistician based primarily in Brigham, and I finished just on time.
Guess we're taking questions right now? Sure.
Hey.
Anybody have a question?
Thanks. That was a great overview of an interesting topic. So I wondered, in this area, have they ever gone out and tried to get some random subset pressed on responding so they could inform that estimated odds ratio? Because I know they use that in other studies where there's loss to follow-up.
Right. I don't think it's very common in these substance use clinical trials to do that. I mean, of course, that's a great thing to do if you want to inform yourself about what the real relationship between missing data and the outcome of interest is. If you can get a sort of a random sample of individuals who dropped out and obtain their values. But I don't think it's very common in clinical trials in this setting. We're only actually looking at clinical trial data from existing trials. So NIDA was just very interested in, there's been a lot of trials around that they've sponsored, and they've had no successes. And so they're kind of curious, there's a lot of data that they have, is there any sort of signal for a measure other than abstinence? So these are existing trials. In terms of the missing data, none of them have used methods like that. Yeah?
Where does that worst value imputation idea come from? Because I haven't heard of that in other missing data contexts.
Yeah, I think it comes from clinicians, investigators' prior beliefs that, if you're supposed to turn up on Monday for a urine screen and you don't show, you were using over the weekend. So they have a sort of strong prior that the missing data is non-ignorable or is not missing at random. But I think it's the strength of the worst value imputation where you're saying you're certain, and there's no uncertainty about that. That's the part that's problematic. So I think most investigators would believe that odds ratio is greater than 1, but not infinite. Our job.
What must have when they looked at the Kinsey report, the way they handled it is they looked at the worst case scenario and then they repeated it with the best case scenario. And what that does is gives you a
Bounds. Yeah.
And what that also shows you is how much information you actually have in the data before you start making assumptions and adding biases of your own. I don't know, did you look into?
Well, no, but I mean, I would agree with you. You know, in the discrete data setting, you know, if you're looking upon, you know, use versus non-use, it's very easy to do that. And so, in a way, you can consider the worst value imputation as a bound on your sensitivity analysis. But that's not what's being done here. It's the worst value imputation is being done as the prime analysis, not as a sensitivity analysis.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
I understand that.
Yeah.
But it's really only half the story. Because it could be.
Yeah, I think if you talk to the subject matter experts in this area, they don't think it's quite so likely that people are not showing up for their screens and whatever. They're not used. But I think. Yeah. Right.
I'm sorry to ask a second question, but the doctoral students have expressed interest in having the lightning talk speakers announce whether they're interested in taking on any doctoral students to work with. So I just thought, so.
Possibly.
You can just point to the ones.
Possibly. I mean, I would have to be very candid. I may not be a great. I mean, you don't see me around the department too often, and there's a reason I'm based at McLean, and so that creates some challenges.
Any other questions? Thank you so much. And next up is the most excellent Elysia. She's going to share some of her research with us. Thank you very much.
Great, so I am actually going to share some practice rather than research. I'm excited to talk to you today about the McGoldrick Professional Development Program in Public Health, together with the ARISE network. So this network has come together, and this program has come together to help build statistical capacity in sub-Saharan Africa. And it's been in existence in one version or another for a number of years, and then underwent kind of a revamping last year. And under Marcello's guidance and Sarah Noki, who was here last year, they implemented the first round of capacity building for faculty fellows, reached out to 7 faculty fellows across 7 different countries in sub-Saharan Africa, and taught them how to teach this class in monitoring and evaluation. And the idea is that by doing this, we can help relieve some of the burden that many instructors face in developing curriculum. We certainly face that burden here, but in sub-Saharan Africa, the burden can be even stronger. Also to create an international community of instructors that can work collaboratively. So these are kind of the 2 big goals. And then through doing that, we can reach even more students than we would be able to if we were to just fly people over here and do a 4 to 6 month training over here in the US. This year we expanded quite a bit. We reached 12 faculty fellows across 11 universities in 8 sub-Saharan African countries. And together we developed a course called Methods for Data Management with Software Application. And we adapted our model a little bit. So we did a 4-phase model. We started off with some online training. We did this through Canvas. We had 5 modules that the fellows went through. And then that meant that when we met together in Rwanda this time instead of meeting in Boston, we had already covered a lot of the content for the course. And we were able to spend a bunch of time on pedagogical training, which was great. It was the first time a lot of faculty, I think a lot of faculty here even, have not gone through pedagogical training. And certainly there, that it was limited, so everybody was really excited to spend a week doing that and building out the course content. They then offered the course to 25 students at the University of Rwanda. It was a mix of PhD students there and then students who were coming from NGOs in the community. And then the final phase of this training is that they'll all go back to their institutions in the other 7 countries and offer the course there. It's already ongoing. Right now, this week, the course is being offered in Tanzania. So we had some questions that we're starting to dig into about whether or not this model works, this training model. So we had 4 training goals, and we've started to go through them and evaluate them. So this first one is, did we fully develop a course? We certainly did. We have a syllabus, we have 10 modules, we have lectures, labs, assignments, and rubrics, and they've all been adapted to be used in the sub-Saharan African context. The fellows' course content knowledge also improved. We did a pre-post test looking at their knowledge of data management, saw an increase in 20 percentage points on that test, and their self-rated knowledge also dramatically improved. Both their pedagogical knowledge and confidence in their teaching has also dramatically improved. We did a pre-post test in this area as well. And then the biggest success is really creating this network of faculty. So I said that right now the course is being offered in Tanzania. The fellow from Ghana volunteered his time. He flew out to Tanzania, supported by the McGoldrick program, and helped to co-teach the course. And then unbeknownst to me until this week, all of the other fellows have been helping to grade all of the assignments that have been going on this week. So they've just built this really strong network of support. So our next steps are threefold. One is to get all the remaining fellows to go back to their countries and their home institutions and teach the class. The M&E course that Marcello and Sarah focused on last year, we're going to be offering round 2 of that starting in May. And then we're going to gear up to train fellows in a new course. So this speaks a little bit to your question of what opportunities are next. So not research necessarily, although if you want to build a research project out of this, I'm sure Marcello and I would love to talk to you about that. But also if you're interested in helping to develop the next course in this series, or if you're interested in helping to teach and mentor, and if you're interested in traveling, then we would love to talk to you. That's it. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Elysia?
What are the computing resources that you have? Like you're using R or?
So we actually chose to use Stata. So there was 2 pieces to this. One was building out the actual survey data collection. So we used Open Data Kit and Survey CTO, which is a free software for collecting data. And then we opted for Stata. It seems to be the most commonly used and then the lowest hurdle. So a lot of people are coming into this with low Excel skills, and so R felt a little bit intimidating for this level here. Yeah.
What resources did you use to create the M&E curriculum, and why choose M&E in particular?
So Marcello has been teaching M&E here for 10 years, a long time. so it was a bit different. So for the first round, they had everything. So Marcello and Bethany Het and Sarah Noki have built out the content in the labs and everything, and were able to hand it all over. This time, I was developing this from scratch and showed up in Rwanda with it about 80% developed, and then we finished it off together, which was actually a really cool experience. It had never co-developed a course with 12 other people before, but it meant that it really fits the context. All of our examples are African-based examples, and it's, yeah.
We got some funding one summer and bought a camera and bought a big Mac with software, and we just spent the summer filming the course and putting it on. It's all on video. It's all available, to distribute around the world, and we just wanted to show that we could do it, and we did. But then you say, well, look what I got. What am I going to do with it?
Thanks for sharing your very important work. It's always nice to hear what Marcello's up to besides writing inspiring qual problems. I know which ones. Next up, we have the great Steve, who's going to be imparting some knowledge on us about some work or research, I guess. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. I'm new to all of you, or nearly all of you, so I thought I'd spend a minute introducing myself. I came here in July after spending the last 10 years in Southern California, oddly, for somebody with biostatistics background, running a cancer center. Those days are over, and I came here to work on some projects I'll describe in a moment. I've been a clinical trialist for about 40 years. The first trial I worked on was published in 1980. How many of you were born after 1980? As I suspect. No problem. I spent a good bit of my professional career in Baltimore at Hopkins, where I was located in the Department of Oncology, but had appointments in public health, in biostatistics, and epidemiology. My position here in Longwood is also somewhat anomalously in the Department of Surgery, but there's a lot of reasons why that works extremely well for me. So here's what I'm up to, and the first couple bullets on there is the thing that I'm probably spending the most time on and might be of some interest to a highly motivated student. I'm working with the Alliance, what used to be called Cooperative Group. It's now called National Clinical Trials Network. It's part of the apparatus and infrastructure that the National Cancer Institute has set up to test and develop new therapies in cancer. Alliance is a large multimodality group. We put probably 5,000 patients on clinical trials of varying kinds every year. In that group, I have an administrative and leadership role, but I also have a project role. And the project I'm working on is called iCare, I-C-A-R-E. It's not on the slide, but it's an attempt to induce the electronic medical record to contain structured data of the kind that are commonly used in clinical trials. Those of you who don't have much experience with electronic health records may know or may not that the electronic health record, while it's electronic, it is essentially electronic paper. And much of the data that is contained in that record is unstructured. And the way that we use it for clinical trials is a human looks at the electronic paper and then swivels over on the stool to enter the data into a case report form that contains structured data. We're trying to do away with that anomaly of having a human curate the data that's in an electronic format. And so getting data out of the point of care and into a form that one could use for clinical trials and less demanding data applications is the goal of that project. In addition to that, I'll quickly mention that I'm working with the Brigham Center for Clinical Investigation, which is a small production shop. I have historically done a lot of work on the continual reassessment method, which is a model-based dose-finding method for phase 1 clinical trials. I'm working on translational trials and a new method that I call envelope simulation, which is a generalization of the continual reassessment method. With a current postdoc, who I had assumed up until this point would be my last postdoc, we're developing a web-based introduction to clinical trials. The work on that is mostly done, and we're looking for a home and doing some recording at this point. And then I have two very hypothetical projects that could be quite interesting, or they could go bust. One is I call Can Dogs Smell Cancer? You may have seen this on the news, but I have some good colleagues over many years who think the answer is yes, and they've asked for some statistical help on that project. If somebody's highly motivated and adventuresome, we could talk. Botanicals to cure what ails you, notably cancer. This flies in the face of the current thinking about cancer therapeutics, which are highly targeted, single agent, 1 or 2 pathway, clean kinds of drugs. The botanicals that we're studying are the exact opposite. They hit many pathways. They're more than dirty. They hit thousands of genomic pathways in the cell, and some of the preliminary data on these are quite promising. and they're just now entering clinical trials. Is that the end?
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I'm done. Come and talk to me if you're interested. Thank you.
Any questions? Yes.
What hints do you have that dogs can smell cancer?
Well, I'm told, and I have not personally seen the preliminary data, I'm told that it's quite positive and that it's made believers out of some hardened skeptics. The dogs are in the UK, from what I understand, and some of the investigation is being done there and some here in Boston and some on the West Coast. So I'm waiting to see the data, but I'm told by people that I respect and trust that they're convinced.
But I was kind of special.
To that effect, but I think that they require some training, and they've been primarily interested in sniffing out prostate cancer from urine specimens, and they've been highly trained on that. Okay, thank you so much.
Fascinating. Thank you very much. And then I guess for our final talk today, we have Stella. I'm just gonna take a punt on the last name there. Bella's here to tell us about talented fundamental truncation. Let's do it.
Okay. I will talk about two projects. So that have three things in common. So one first thing is that it's about survival. The second one I will not talk about, although it's survival, I will not talk about censoring. And the third thing that I will focus on another complication that is very common in survival data. It's called truncation, and truncation is very different from censoring. While censoring is an incomplete follow-up of sampled people, truncation is a problem of selection bias. So yeah, I called my talk as challenges. Oh, only challenges? In fact, yeah, challenges and opportunities. So yeah, I wanted to say that now I feel like the first project is mostly challenges, while the second one I feel mostly opportunities. And probably, like I explained this by that, the second one I did during my PhD thesis, which was like I finished 3 years ago, and probably I just forgot all the difficulties that I had. Yeah, so let's see why truncation is a selection bias problem, and let's look at this example of AIDS data that it is an old data set. If you can see, it was sampled in 1986, and it was retrospective ascertainment of AIDS cases that resulted from contaminated blood transfusion, which means that at this year, researchers came to the Center for Disease Control and looked backward, and some picked only those who developed AIDS until this time point. All these gray incubation periods were invisible to those researchers who came to sample patients at this time, because at that time it was impossible to identify the people who belong to that population. So our interest was here to characterize the incubation periods of AIDS, and it is the problem of right truncation, because our lifetime of interest t was truncated from the right by some another random variable r. So why I feel that this problem is full of challenges, because the main problem is the unobserved right tail of the distribution of our incubation period, and it results in bias. So let's look at this animation. In this animation, I generated the population, two subpopulations, and we have one binary covariate. We are interested to see how these two subpopulations will change under right truncation. So the green density is the density of the truncation variable, and the heavier truncation is, the more these two subpopulations become similar and similar, and without any adjustment, we just end up with very similar subpopulations, and we cannot identify any effect of our binary covariate in the right truncated sample. So we developed some methods. I will not talk about solutions that we suggest, but you can look at this our project, where we have very extensive help with Vignette. So if you are interested in the analysis of right truncated data. Another problem is related to the multi-state data. Here I looked at the illness-death model, which it is the generalization of ordinary univariate survival data, where we have 2 stages in the lifetime, and the process evolves over time and passes through different states. Okay, I'll finish. So we didn't arrive here to opportunities, but if you're interested, you can ask me.
Thanks, Bella. Do we have any questions? Bella. All right. Thank you so much. I guess that concludes our lightning talks, everybody. Thank you all for coming out. Always great to see everybody. So I guess eat, drink, be statisticians, or whatever you guys do. Yeah, see you back next time.